Hi, welcome to Online Yoga School. I'm Steph, and today, as part of our Yoga Foundation series, we're going to be working on Hero Pose, Virasana. So we're going to need a block and 2 blankets. Now, if you don't have a block and blankets, you could use a book, like a hardcover book in place of the block. You could even use a bolster or a pillow. And you could use towels or just blankets that you have at home if you don't have a yoga blanket. So if you don't know how to fold a yoga blanket, be sure to watch my video on how to fold a yoga blanket. And I'll make sure to add that link to this video. So let's begin with taking the one blanket and bringing it onto the mat. Now, you may be thinking that you don't need a blanket to practice hero pose. And maybe you don't, but today, let's just try it with the blanket the first time. Sometimes it's really nice to have that support. And I think it's nice to do our yoga postures and progressions, right? So let's start with the support and see how that feels, because this is really quite a taxing pose on the knees and even the ankles. So we want to take care of those joints. And then if you find that it feels better for you without the support, we'll have that option later on. So we're going to bring the knees onto the blanket. And before you do, just kind of make sure that your blanket is flat and folded evenly, because you wouldn't want like the right knee higher than the left or vice versa. So come onto your blanket and you're going to walk the knees onto the blanket and then have the feet hanging off the blanket. So kind of right on the ankle, the tops of the feet are off the blanket and the edges of the blanket line up with the ankle. And then notice what's happening with the feet, because the tendency here is that they tend to like roll out or roll in. So think about keeping the feet straight, the top of the foot flat down on the mat. And then go ahead and align like shoulders over hips over knees. Kind of take a slight tuck of the tailbone, knit the ribs so that the ribs aren't poking out here. And notice how that feels. And we're going to grab a block and bring it between the feet. You can kind of squeeze the block with the feet, which may feel like a little bit of activation in the legs. So from here, we're going to begin to bend the knees and start to sit back. Pause here, bring the hands onto the thighs and kind of roll that fleshy part of the thigh and the knee out to the side as you sit back on the block and settle in. And let's just pause here for a moment and notice what we're feeling. Sit up nice and tall, kind of proud like a hero. And then if it feels okay for you, you can bring the knees together. If that feels like too much, you can leave the knees apart. You want to really listen to your body. So the belly is active. The ribs are knitted. We're not popping the ribs out here. Ribs are knitted, which means we have a slight tuck of the tailbone. Shoulders are over hips. The knees are kind of right in line with the hips. And then we walk them in a little bit. And the tops of the feet are still pressing down. And then you can rest the hands right on the thighs. And this is a great setup for pranayama or for meditation. A lot of time we do our breath work practices from hero pose. And the reason why is because that central energy channel, that central nadi, Sushumna nadi, is able to have a lot of space here. So the energy can really flow up and down through the body. Great for breath work. So this is one option. Now we're going to play with a second option. So you'll take your second blanket and go ahead and lift off of the block. Come into tabletop for a moment and maybe take a few cat-cows here. And then we'll take the blanket and we're going to bring it into the crease of the knee, okay? So the blanket comes right into the knee crease so that we're decreasing a little bit of the bend in the knee. We're not going to go so far into flexion of the knee joint. And then we'll bring the block right in between the feet again. And from tabletop, begin to walk the hands back and lower the hips back towards the block. Pause to kind of roll that fleshy part of the thighs out or maybe your calves. And then you sit back onto the block. Sit up nice and tall here. And again, we're engaging the belly, tucking the ribs slightly, tucking the tailbone, shoulders are right over the hips. So we're sitting up nice and tall. And then maybe take a slight tuck of the chin. So we want to keep the neck in line with the rest of the spine. And take a few breaths here. Notice how this variation feels for you. Great place again for breath work. And this variation is nice because it takes some pressure off of the knees. Now I'm going to show you one more variation with the blanket. So that second blanket that we used, we're going to take out, we're going to extend it long and kind of roll it up, right? And this time we're going to bring it right on top of the ankles. And you can use a block here or you don't have to. I'm still going to use my block. Use the hands to roll that fleshy part out from the calves, the thighs, and then lower back down onto the block or onto the earth. And notice how this feels. So this gives us a little bit more space here. So we're still creating a little space for the knees, and we're creating a little padding for us in the backs of the ankles. You can bring the knees together if that feels good. So we're sitting between the heels and the knees come together. And if bringing the knees together is too much for you, you can keep them apart. And then with the belly engaged, lengthen the spine and take a couple of breaths here. Check in with this variation. Does this one feel better or worse than some of the others that we've practiced today? Now, some people have a little bit of sensitivity on the bottoms of the feet. So another thing you can do is bring a blanket underneath the feet, if that feels good for you. So now we're going to move the blankets to the side, and we're going to try hero's pose, Virasana pose, with only the block, okay? So bring the block between the feet, squeeze the block with the feet, start in tabletop, and then begin to walk the hands back, roll the flesh from the calves or the thighs out of the way, sit back on the block. Notice how this variation is feeling. If you can, maybe bring the knees together, sit up nice and tall, tuck the belly, tuck the ribs, kind of tuck the tailbone to engage that abdominal wall. And then bring the shoulders stacking right on top of the hips. And this still is a great place for your breath work. We're in the same posture, we just don't have the padding underneath. So you can kind of notice how that feels. And you know, whether or not you want the support is a really personal choice. I tend to think if I'm going to be in hero's pose for a long time, if I'm doing, say, a 30-minute pranayama breathwork practice, I'm probably going to have the blanket underneath for support. If I'm just here for a beat, maybe I'm okay. If you've had any type of knee injury, previous knee surgeries, or even if you just have sensitive knees today, you definitely want to have the blanket underneath to make sure that the knees are padded. And there are instances when hero's pose may not be safe for you. So if you know that it's not safe for you to put this much pressure on your knees, then this is just a posture that you wouldn't want to practice. And there are other postures that you could practice. You can check out my video on Adept's Pose Siddhasana or Easy Pose Sukhasana. These are both great options also for breath work and meditation. So let's try it without the block, only if it's safe. So we'll remove the block, come into tabletop, and maybe take a couple of cat-cows here, maybe a few hip rolls. Just kind of give yourself whatever you need. If the ankles are feeling tight, you can maybe flex and extend the ankles, take some ankle rolls. And then we're going to begin to walk the hands back, pause when they get to the knees, roll out the flesh from the calves, from the thighs, and slowly come to sit between the heels. Notice how you feel. Big difference here. Maybe you bring the knees together if that feels okay, and the palms can come to rest right on the thighs. Sit up nice and tall in this position and take a breath here. Think about what feels different. If you're feeling any pain or discomfort, you can always bring the blanket here between the knee crease or underneath the knees, even without the support of the block. And this, my friends, is hero's pose Virasana. You'll see this a lot in most of your public yoga classes, so it's helpful to know how to practice this pose safely or how to teach it to your students safely if you're a yoga teacher. So let's come out of the pose, walk the hands forward, and just kind of tuck the toes and shift back and forth. Get a little bit of movement through the knees, get the blood moving, and then we'll come to sit down Bring the knees out in front of you, the feet out in front of you, and take a few ankle rolls one at a time. Thank you for practicing with me today. If you liked the video, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'd love to hear how this went for you in the comments.